So, Pixar in Box Part B. If you haven't seen Part A, it doesn't really matter if you haven't actually seen it, but there is also a Part A, which is talking more about the story structure and the emotional journey. But this one, we're going to be talking more about visual language. And uh, as I said, this is actually an online course that's available. So this is just a sample, like my summary of the things that appeal to me the most out of it. Feel free to go off and watch the whole course, of course. They teach it a lot better than I am going to here. But visual language can actually tell more of a story than the dialogue. And there's things like colours, if you've got a warm yellow sunset, that can feel happy. Dark grey clouds and rain is when people are sad and so forth. There are aspects like if something is big in a picture, then it's probably important. Something small shows you how vulnerable they are. The contrast of light and dark can help highlight and draw attention, so the lighting is important. So there's a whole lot of aspects to visual language that can really impact the person's understanding. That little picture in the corner is just one big guy, and you're looking over his shoulder, and you can barely see the other guy, and so it's just sort of trying to set them their sizing relative thing. Composition, it's putting together all the visual elements in a scene, so it's got lines, shapes, shape, tone, movement, colours. And what they'll often do is they create beat boards. They capture the key points of the story, draw them up, and just have one board per beat. So you can watch the whole movie just by looking through this fairly short list of diagrams. Storyboards go into a lot more detail. They map out every single shot in the whole movie. So they go into a lot of detail. But they tend to be sketches, black and white. You might colour them occasionally. Concept art is when they sort of take particular key points and actually draw it all up with full colour. So everybody's got the same vision of the look and feel. And like, here's how the street should look, or here's how the township should look, and the overall feel of it. Another thing that was interesting to me, and I should have included a picture, but is silhouettes. If you take the picture and sort of like try to threshold it into black and white, will the character stand out from the background, or will it be all confused? And so if they're doing a big jump, maybe you want blue sky behind them, so there's a clear patch of sky, and then you can see them against the sky. That works better than if they're jumping in there in front of a tree. Well, it's going to be hard to see them in front of all those leaves. And so silhouettes is a useful technique to actually make sure that your composition is actually good, and it'll be easy to for the audience to view and understand. Motion, there's different ways of creating the illusion of motion for the storyboards. You can do motion lines. Another one is though the postures of the character. So if somebody's going to punch someone, they might lean back, and this is called anticipation. Rather than just the fist going out forward, they pull your fist back, and they might lean back a bit with their spine, and then they throw their shoulder forward and the punch goes forward, and they call that stretch in terms of animation. So working out things like this and just trying to get the overall flow of the character helps make the animation better. And there's other aspects, like if you're running, you have the character lean forward and so forth, and lean into the corners and so forth, just to make it feel more natural. Another aspect of visual language is tone and the colour, like shading. Like light colours tend to be happy and fun, dark tends to be sad. Low contrast tends to be low energy, whereas high contrast colours tends to indicate more interest and energy. Surroundings can be dark to bring attention to something that's in the middle. Colour, contrasting colours, again, it makes it stand out more. They gave an interesting example of Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles. He started out with a blue uniform. Well, it tends to be a fairly calm sort of colour. Then he gets a boring job, and guess what? He's wearing a white shirt. There's no life in that whatsoever, really. And then when he gets back to work, he gets a red uniform, which is a lot more energetic. And so he's sort of evolved. And so the colour of what he's wearing is actually telling a story as well as the actual actions going on. Staging and framing. Staging is where you position the characters in a shot. There's different sorts of shots you may use. There's wide shots, which tend to be for an establishing shot. You're introducing a new location. And to help the audience realise where you are, you might do a wide shot so you can see the whole school ground, or see the whole wherever they are, parking lot, shopping centre, or something like that. And then you normally follow that with medium shots, which is sort of like waist up. And then you insert the occasional close shots to emphasize, like it might be just a head or and so forth. And you pick the shots based on the feeling you want. Now, you're allowed to break the rules, but you just got to do it carefully. An example was you could start on just the wheel of a car on a racetrack and then take it out wider and wider, showing that they're in the middle of a race and the racetrack, and sort of builds a bit of excitement that way. Um, but the ideas are important. Help the audience understand what's going on where they are. Oh, and framing. Once you've picked a shot, you've got to decide what should be in and out of the shot, and that's so it's the frame is sort of like the edge of the actual shot that you're going to take. So how do you pick what sort of shots, like close up, pan, and so forth? Well, one of the things is don't get too carried away with dynamic shots, shots that move the camera around the place. They can start to lose the audience for after a bit. I remember there was one, I forgot his name, some famous Japanese anime artist, and he never uses moving shots. He's always got it static, and he actually creates really good work. So it's not like you have to have moving shots. Now, easy shot, center shot, you put the person right smack bang in the middle. It's fairly simple. It's a neutral sort of feel. There is something called the rule of thirds, and what you do is you put things slightly off center to 1/3. And so if you look in this particular case, he's standing slightly to the right, but it's also his eyes are at another thirds of the way up. And it just seems to be look more interesting sometimes when you go for these thirds sorts of looks. So that's the rule of thirds, just trying to put interesting things on these lines, 1/3 of the across or 1/3 up and down, and particularly where those points meet. There's lots of other sorts of shots. You've got static shots where the camera doesn't move, dynamic shots where the camera does move, an up shot whereas the camera is look down low, looking up, and so it's sort of like you're looking up under their chin. He's looking down your nose at you. A down shot is the opposite direction. You're looking down on somebody, who makes them look small and vulnerable. A Dutch is where you tilt the camera on an angle and it creates a sort of an uneasing, sort of unnatural feel. Panning is frequently used to introduce a new character. You might show character A and then it slides over and you see, oh, there's actually somebody else there as well. A dolly shot is it's a pan, but it's horizontal to the ground, just moving sideways. You've got zooming in and out. You've got tracking in and out. So is zooming is staying the same distance. Tracking moves the camera closer, and it just makes the background look a little bit different. They're both similar. They'll both make the characters look bigger or smaller. Tracking shots is sort of like when the camera is following a character. The character's walking along and the camera's going with them. You got handheld, which I dislike, which is sort of like the camera's jumping all around the place. Punch in is sort of like, rather than panning in, it's just cuts straight to a zoomed in view, and so you can sort of like punch into their eyes, and you just suddenly like, oh, I can see exactly what the feeling is through their eyes. And there's a number of other sorts of shots. I'm not going to go through all of them. Lighting is another aspect, like the key light, which direction is it going? A fill light, which just creates an overall feel for the whole area. Rim lighting helps you put a little bit of light edge around the edge of the character, which can help him stand out from the background a little bit. A kick lights from the side. There's bounce, which is reflections of tables and walls. There's different colours for lightings. There's a whole lot of things you can do here. There's a whole series just on lighting. But it is worthwhile thinking about what sort of lighting you want for a scene. So, for example, I was creating an episode where it was in the morning, and so I decided to have a fairly intense light coming in at a steep angle with lots of shadows, because the first morning light with a clear sunny day tends to be like that. So there were a number of visual sorts of aspects when you put together your story.